afternoon, folks, coming to you live from northeast Tasmania. A little bit drizzly. I've got a video here for you that'll probably be in a couple of parts. I had the pleasure of going and meeting and getting to stay at the property of Gary Opit. Gary Opit is a renowned cryptozoologist, zoologist, field naturalist, and just a generally very passionate, intelligent man who's got many decades of experience with Australian wildlife and plants and the habitats they reside in. Gary and his wife were very accommodating. They let me stay at their house for a few days. I tried to jam in as much interviewing with Gary as I could in that time. It was a awesome experience. His knowledge, his library, I would give my left hand just to have his library. I'd have trouble reading the books, but it would be worth it. His library is just amazing. He's got such a huge collection of stuff. Not just thylacine stuff, he's got stuff on, you name it, something to do with nature, he's got a book on it. So I really hope you enjoy my interview with Gary. It was a real pleasure to meet him. It was an honour to meet him. I could have sat there talking to Gary for a month and I don't think he would have repeated himself once in that whole time. He just has so much knowledge, so much experience and so much to share. It was a real honour to meet him. So hope you enjoy it and stay safe. Have a good day. All the best. Okay, so thanks again, Gary, for your time.
Yes, here we are. So this is second day.
Day two of filming, well, first day of filming and second day of having a chat.
Yeah.
I think we got up to pretty much around the late 70s in your career and sort of covered a fair bit about the Yowie phenomenon. I know you want to talk to me about cryptozoology in general, so maybe we should start off there.
Yeah.
From, I don't know which part of your career you want to go from, but I know you've had a lot of history with unusual animal sightings, being thylacine or thylacoleos or other unknown cryptids.
Yeah.
Which part of that era really sort of stands out for you as a bit of a... I don't suppose there are many turning points because you've always been fascinated in nature in general, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. My whole life has been involved in understanding reality, basically, and of course the majority of people, their understanding of reality is based on normal human occupations and orientations, and so nearly everything they're talking about is pure fantasy, it's illusion.
Yeah.
And the reality is quite astounding. We're absolutely remarkable entities, and most people don't appreciate how unbelievably fortunate we are to be alive and to be able to understand reality. I mean, we're a remote part of the universe. We live in a universe constructed out of gigantic exploding stars and black holes and supernovae. It's a chaotic, accidental universe, and as far as we're aware, there's only one stable, harmonious place in the known universe, and that's our wonderful planet that we refer to in English as Earth. And we see ourselves as human beings and as individuals, but in reality we're actually populations of symbiotic microbes living together.
Yeah, and we're all one reality.
Yeah. The only living organism is the living surface of the planet, composed of microorganisms
of various shapes and sizes.
And a great many of them have evolved to live together and create what we refer to as plants and animals. And so the whole history of life on Earth is a history of microbiology.
Yeah.
And so I've lectured to high school and university students on microbiology, on zoology, botany, ecology, anthropology, geography and cosmology, and
The whole shebang.
yeah, and I created all of those courses.
Yep.
And they're all for the Shearwater Steiner School in
Okay.
Mullumbimby and the University of Long Island, the Australian field campus of the Long Island University
In New York.
in New York, but their field campus in Byron Bay. So
Okay.
I've always just been locally
Focused.
teaching and researching in southern New South Wales, northern New South Wales. Now, as I said earlier, I spent 1.5 years in New Guinea,
Yep.
and of course my greatest interest has been ecology and zoology, botany, anthropology, and so I spent a long time studying cultures, basically just for myself, because I was very fortunate. I come from an affluent society,
Yep.
and I was never motivated by acquisitions of material possessions or properties or anything like
It's
that.
just this fascination of nature.
I
how
just
it works.
thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I was always a free thinker. Like I was always independent. Like I did what I wanted to do, and most of that was living with Stone Age warriors
Yep.
in New Guinea, or spending time with Aboriginal people, with the true Australians, or living with different cultures all through Southeast Asia. The Aimu people in northern Japan, in Hokkaido, and live with Japanese, and through 76, 77, 78 in Southeast Asia, from northern Japan all the way down to Bali, when Bali was horse and carts and dirt roads and very few backpackers. And I was mainly in the national parks, bird watching and spotlighting for mammals at night, etc., and identifying the animals.
Doing your own research, essentially.
Yes, that's right, and for no other reason than
Your own interest.
my own interest,
And sharing that knowledge.
and sharing that knowledge, and of course, and mainly in Australia, all over Australia, and then my wife and I, we spent 1.5 years with the children before they started school, camping out the remotest areas of Cape York Peninsula or Northern Territory and Western Australia and through the Indonesian islands.
Yep.
Then we had to settle down once they started school, and then I started working, doing mainly fauna and flora surveys,
Yep.
and lecturing to a university and high school and TAFE students.
You went to university
And
yourself?
I went to university, but I was lecturing on ecology before I'd ever been to university, because I'm 73. There were no courses.
For that subject matter.
There was zoology courses and what have you, but I had virtually nothing to do with cities and civilization right from a young age. I was always off by myself. That's what I love to do, studying the plants and animals. Always a very inquisitive mind, and I never stayed long. Always proud of the fact I never stayed longer than 3 months. And then I'd work at all different kinds of jobs here and there, pick up a bit of work.
Yep.
I was never one had to have any plans or ambitions. Like I was always just open to everyone, and always loved people, and so I was always being asked to do this or that, and nice sort of things. And this friend asked me to buy a share in his yacht and sail the Queensland coast and the Great Barrier Reef for 6 months in a trimaran, 1956 Hartley Sparkle trimaran.
So you saw a lot of Australia.
I've seen a lot of Australia, exactly, and and had a wonderful time, and was involved in all kinds of conservation campaigns, and spent 1.5 years down in Tasmania on the Franklin Dams campaign. I was one of the
In the
upriver
1980s, 82,
organisers.
83.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so so that's how pretty much I spent my life. I'm very different to most of the people who who are, as I said, primarily sedorunts, and so they spend their lives
in a very small area.
Yeah, that's right. You know, they're family and friends. They're doing what's normal for people, but yeah, I've never been interested in that. I find that, and I don't like repetition. Like, it's boring. I'm interested. But I love meeting different people and different cultures,
So, speaking of sedorant and sedentary kind of areas, you've settled here on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. There's a lot of really nice remnant rainforests in these areas. And a lot of unusual animals have been seen by various walks of life of people, everyday people in the area. What sort of history have you got on, like thylacine / thylacoleos sightings in the general area where you are now?
So when I saw that animal that closely resembled a thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, in about '69, crossing the road in southeast Queensland, and then of course before the days of the internet and personal computers, it was very hard to pick up any reports of anything unknown, and so just having seen thylacoleo and having had close encounters with another very large animal, generally known as the yowie, so I knew they were definitely out there, and I knew that people were probably encountering them, but there was no way of determining that. But I didn't think there were many encounters.
A lot of those reports would have come through the radio stations and newspapers back in those days.
Yeah, so the first encounters that I really began reading about was from Rex and Heather Gilroy's books.
Okay.
But primarily from their articles in local newspapers, and so they would come up on expeditions into southeast Queensland, northern New South Wales, and they'd be interviewed by the Gold Coast Bulletin. So I've got lots of newspaper clippings of all of these interesting expeditions that Rex and Heather Gilroy were undertaking. But anyway, in 1995, so I lived on Tamborine Mountain for 25 years. I had a lovely little house there, and then we moved down into northern New South Wales to Byron Shire. I'd always liked Byron Shire because, and northern New South Wales, because the place is so far from the capital city that there's a lack of development, so there's a lot of natural bushland and small communities, lovely little towns, rural communities and beachside people and all kinds of interesting people. I was at the Aquarius hippie festival. It was actually, there was 3 of those festivals, and I went to the one at the Australian National University in Canberra. I think they were called more folk arts festivals, university arts festivals, and then the Nimbin Festival was the 3rd one. And I spent a couple of weeks at that, and of course they were different to festivals today. They had some bit of live music, and they had all kinds of. They were arts festivals, so
a lot more casual.
Yeah, and of course there was almost no hippies today. It's more known to do with drugs, but there was virtually no drugs in those days. We didn't know about drugs, and we weren't much into alcohol or drinking or smoking or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I was referred to myself as Numbat, the Nimbin naturalist, and I wrote an article in the local little Nimbin Aquarius Festival newspaper that was put out, of which I've got a copy, an article on the bunyip.
Okay.
And the bunyip, one of the last reported sightings of the bunyip was around about 40 kilometres or so south of Lismore in northern New South Wales. And once again, it was in this area, the bunyip was always described as a very large aquatic animal, freshwater animal. It made a roaring noise, and it was well known to farmers who had properties on rivers, and they were seen to take swans So anyway, there was even a University of Queensland expedition to try to find out what this animal was. But most of the bunyips, the freshwater bunyips, were almost certainly seals.
Yeah.
And
that come up rivers.
That's right. Yeah, and as we said before, sea leopards or leopard seals, huge, one of the largest seals, a true carnivore, and there's reports by national park rangers and fishermen of leopard seals swimming all the way up the Clarence River to as far as Grafton, and I think in the 1990s.
They've even been seen.
Yeah.
That recently.
Yeah, and so that's probably what bunyips were. However, it's possible that there were some of the last remnants of the megafauna that were being, because in some of the early natural history books, they refer to bunyips as huge, giant wombat, cow-sized wombat-like animals,
which would fit the diprotodon.
Yeah, that's right. In the tea tree scrubs of Victoria. I remember one particular volume describes the wombat in that way, the wombat, the bunyip, and so then 1997, after we moved down to Northern New South Wales, I initiated a wildlife talkback program on ABC North Coast Local Radio to identify wildlife for listeners, and so I began a citizen science course, citizen science study, because what I do, my wife Carmel and I created a seasonal synopsis of all the wildlife throughout the year, every month of the year, what's breeding and what's migrating, etc.
Yep.
And so I use that, and so these programs are on for half an hour once a fortnight on ABC North Coast Local Radio, then called, I think it was called, Big River Radio or something, Richmond and Clarence Rivers, and so it extend. I got callers. It was live to air, and I got callers from the Gold Coast and Tamborine Mountain, all the way down to Coffs Harbour.
Okay.
And
not a bad area to cover.
Vast area.
Yeah.
And so, on the very first program, I was astounded to receive a report or an inquiry from a family. I think they were from Coffs Harbour from memory, and they'd gone for a picnic in one of the national parks, and they found these gigantuous footprints, very much like this footprint. I'll grab one.
These are like hominid prints.
Yeah, so this is a plaster cast of a giant print, and this one was made by Gary Maguire and Andre Clayton. I used to know them well at Springbrook, and in 1998.
Not that long ago.
No, and so anyway, this gentleman phoned up and described these series of giant human-like footprints, very similar to this from his description, up a dry creek bed, and it had only just been made. And when I say dry, I mean there was no water in it, but it was still sort of muddy.
Sand and mud
or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was they followed these footprints for about 1 kilometre, and they just couldn't believe there was these giant footprints, and there was they didn't take any photographs or anything, but there was no fallen leaves, so they were fresh.
Yep.
And so he asked if it was true that these yowies existed. And so I told him yes, from the experiences I've had and the calls that I've had, that the yowie isn't an unknown big
human
primate, human
animal,
hominid or something or other, or hominin, and for that I hadn't ever actually seen the animal, had a decent view of it, but I'd heard it calling, and having done hundreds of fauna and flora surveys and ecological assessments, you identify the wildlife mostly from their calls. So you'd identify all the birds and mammal calls at night, and also scratchings and footprints. And I'd heard some fabulous calls. As I said, in 1995, I had some animal that was roaring as loud as a lion. It definitely wasn't a lion, and because I spent a lot of time in Taronga Zoo.
You were familiar with the cat noises.
Yeah, I could tell the calls of a lion, a tiger, a leopard. They're all got different calls.
Yeah.
And because I adored, always just loved, I prefer spending time in a zoo, examining, studying, and learning about the animals than watching football on TV or something.
Yeah.
And so I heard these incredible calls, and then in 1979, I think it was, I was actually astounded by this fabulous series of calls, which went on for about 5 minutes, and it was sort of like, yay, 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 powerful, booming voice. That's a pale imitation. And after 3 or 4 minutes of it calling non-stop, and this is from my house on Tambury Mountain,
yep.
And the call was coming from just only a few hundred metres away down in Joala National Park in the subtropical rainforest near Curtis Falls. And anyway, 3 dingoes started howling, because I was thinking, is this some sort of auditory hallucination or
you weren't believing your ears.
Like I couldn't believe the loudness of this animal, and it was like nothing I'd ever heard. How it was slightly similar to what I'd heard in New Guinea, in the mountains, of some large animal that I repeatedly heard calling. And anyway, but this booming, bellowing call, which was nothing like a koala or cattle bellowing, it just continued for about 5 minutes, and 3 dingoes started howling, as they often did. Especially at any loud noise, I would respond. And so I had these 3 dingoes howling, oh, 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 like that, and this thing, yay, yay, booming voice, and like 3 times louder than the dingo. And the dingoes ran out of breath, and this thing still kept on calling. And then in 1996, I heard another series of fabulous calls that were absolutely astounding, like nothing I'd ever heard. This is upper main arm of the Brunswick River, sort of northwest of the town of Mullumbimby.
Yep.
And at 3 in the morning, I'd woken up and I'd gone outside for a call of nature, and suddenly there was this yell not far from me, and I thought, oh my goodness. I mean, this is a very remote area. We're renting a property that was a couple of 100 hectares in size, and a 3-kilometre driveway up to this very remote house. There wasn't another house within.
So it wasn't people.
Hundreds of, within several kilometres, and it was right up against the cliffs of a big escarpment. It was complete wilderness. We were renting that place for 1.5 years, and this series of calls started up, and they're like unlike anything I'd ever heard of, and they were like very powerful barks, and they were in groups of 3, and they're sort of like arrow, arrow, arrow. The third one was always the least loud.
Okay.
And of course, I knew the bark of foxes. I'd spent a lot of time in the national parks in Thailand and Malaysia. I knew the calls of barking deer. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what is that, a barking deer or something? That can't be possible. We've got no feral barking deer in Australia. And I thought, no, it's not even barking deer. It's even too loud for that. These calls were always in groups of 3. And they went on for about 5 minutes, so maybe like 100 calls, 90 to 100 calls. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, it began to gurgle as well. So it'd be the 3 barking calls, sort of like, arrow, arrow, arrow. And then, something like that, gurgles, streetal gurgles.
And you put that down to being some sort of
well,
yowie as well?
Well, it's completely unknown. Like, what makes a series of calls like that? They were bizarre, absolutely bizarre. And they went on for... And I had a tape recorder already set up, but I actually went back to the house after the calls ceased and then, brought them back out in case it started up again, but it didn't. And then the next day I found... what looked like 3 big toe marks in a bank, and in a whole area of kangaroo grass, which was really tough tufted grass on this ridgetop under the eucalypt forest canopy, as a woodland, so there's a lot of grassland, and in an area of several square metres, all the grass was dead. And I thought, whoa, I've never seen it. How could kangaroo grass die? So, it doesn't just die. And anyway, I've discovered that every tuft of that grass had been pulled out of the ground. Something had pulled those tufts of grass out and dropped them back down.
That's unusual.
And so as if something had been feeding or something. Anyway, very strange. But I was there for 1.5 years, never found out what it was.
Yeah.
However, one of our close friends was coming up for one of our daughter's birthday parties, all their school friends, and as they were walking up the track, because it was a very steep track, and even though it was a concrete road, but they were frightened their old car mightn't be able to get up the track. This lady is a school teacher, English school teacher, and a 12-year-old son. And as they were walking up the track to come to the party, and this is through, the house was situated on a cleared ridgetop surrounded by undisturbed forest, and as they were walking up the track, they came across what they thought was a child running down to meet them. And they were astounded. This child was running so fast and through the forest, and then it looked like the child was wearing black clothing. And when the child, I've got an illustration by the son somewhere here.
Yeah, that's
I think in this book. And when the child reached them, they realised, oh my God, it's not a child at all. It's in some kind of bizarre animal that looked like a child about a bit over 1 metre tall, but covered in black hair. Anyway, I can't find it here, but it's got the photograph here. Of
the drawing.
The drawing. And anyway, doesn't matter. And so this individual was only like 10, 12 something or other metres away. They realised it was something like an upright chimpanzee-like animal. And then it dropped down onto all fours, and it knuckle walked just like a chimpanzee past them. And of course we have no primates in Australia. We don't have any Southeast Asian animals, except for the dingo that was brought over. Mm-hmm. And otherwise the animals that have been in Australia evolved in Australia. Some snakes and rats got across to Australia from Southeast Asia millions of years ago. But so anyway, and evolved into different species, unique Australian species. So then, so it knuckle walked, and it was about the size of a chimpanzee, roughly, and then it got up onto its hind legs and kept on running down the hill, and so perhaps that's the animal that made these incredible calls.
It's in the same area.
Yeah, it was right in the exact same area. Yeah, it was
okay.
within a kilometre of the house as they were coming up, except the calls were to the west of the house, and this was to the east of the house, and in the 1.5 years that I was there, I spent a lot of time exploring the bushland and found nothing whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Because these animals, whatever they are incredibly rare and
very elusive.
Yeah, elusive. Yeah. But so anyway, so that was the first report I received on air. I wasn't expecting to receive reports of any unknown animals. I thought they were going to be
you were
common
just going
animals.
to research normal wildlife.
Yeah, just go and so anyway, so then.
As the years progressed with your
so very
radio
quickly,
show,
even in the first year, I began receiving reports of thylacines, which I was absolutely astounded. Like, I wasn't expecting to receive any reports of thylacines except in Tasmania. I knew that thylacines had lived several species of thylacines had lived right across Australia, which was always joined to New Guinea and Southeast Asia, and so it's not New Guinea and Southeast Asia, joined to New Guinea and Tasmania, Australia, but there's never been a land bridge between Australia and Southeast Asia, which is why we have no Asian or Eurasian animals. So we don't have squirrels, we don't have monkeys, we don't have cats, we don't have, besides domestic feral cats, we don't have deer, native deer. We would have all of those if there had been a land bridge.
Sure.
So there never has been a land bridge, and that's why we've got these unique Australian fauna, particularly dominated by the mammals, dominated by marsupials.
Yep.
So to receive reports of primate-like animals
Was just
bizarre.
your mind, I suppose.
Yeah. And then to receive reports of thylacines, of Tasmanian tigers, in northeast New South Wales. I was absolutely astounded. But these were detailed reports